Greetings all and welcome to another session here of Tuzi Talks. I'm Dr. Frank Tuzi, your guide through today's lesson. Today we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the Mastering ESL and Bilingual Methods textbook by Herrera and Murray. It's the textbook that's right over there. You can certainly go and order that book off of Barnes & Nobles or Amazon if you are interested. Today they're going to be focusing on another good author, actually two of them, O'Malley and Chamot. They're going to be working and looking at the cognitive academic language learning approach. It's a wonderful approach that I highly recommend you dig into and use in your bilingual courses. Today we're going to be covering some of the cognitive methods and the learning strategies involved in the CALLA approach. We'll look at some of the strategies that you can choose, and there are a variety of them, some especially that Herrera and Murray have added that were not in the typical things that Chamot had put in. We'll look at the CALLA method, and then we'll look at some content speciality that you'll need as you move along in the process. Okay, let's jump in right here at the beginning here and take a look at some cognitive methods for language learning and also some learning strategies. So some of the things that Herrera and Murray are talking about in here is that they're looking at how teachers who are good teachers, effective teachers, should be teaching strategies. I, as a language learner, I've always loved strategies. There are ways to help me learn language more efficiently. And so there are any number of them out there. Most classes that I was in as a student, they never provided any strategies to try to help people learn language. But research has indicated that there are strategies that are out there. It's interesting that some of the cognitive researchers just began to ask language learners, how do you learn? What do you do to help you learn and remember and understand things? And they began to collect these different strategies from language learners. It was quite interesting, that initial research. But now there's a list of them. There's a compiled list of different types of strategies, and they've got research on effective language learning strategies from the students themselves who had used them. One of the interesting things that Herrera and Murray also suggest is that you should have explicit instruction of these strategies. And I do this in my classes. I introduce a strategy and I show students and I explicitly try to explain to them how that strategy can be used and is used. I model it and have them try to incorporate it into their own learning process. Obviously, you can't overwhelm students, but there's definitely want to be able to teach them these different strategies slowly over time. In fact, at some point you may run into an approach to teaching a language which is actually called the strategies approach, where you provide dozens of strategies for students so that they can become independent learners. That's the best way you can learn language anyway, is learning by yourself. And if you have more strategies that are effective in learning, they're going to be better off. All right, so there are different types of strategies that Chamot and O'Malley have suggested. Actually, others have suggested as well. Some of them are cognitive strategies, some of them are metacognitive strategies, and some of them are socioaffective strategies. Now, Herrera and Murray, they also add cross-linguistic strategies. In other words, strategies for learning language based off of your first language. Let's go take a look at some of these strategies. One of them is just information manipulation. And this is where you try to manipulate the information. You'll try to bend it so that it's easier for you to remember, whether you're putting it into some type of order or trying to rearrange it so that it's going to be easier for you to remember. Classification, again, you're putting it into groups and lists of types of things. Linking to background information. I love this type of method for learning language, and it's great when you have the ability to do that. I know that when I was learning Spanish, I could link to background information. I could link to information that I knew in my culture. When I was learning Japanese, that was a little harder to do because there were a lot of things that were completely outside of my realm of background information, so I had nothing to hook it to. In particular, when you were looking at it from the linguistics point of view, which we'll look at later, I had nothing to hook it to, which made it harder to do. Another cognitive strategy is trying to summarize the information. And this I had done, again, when you're learning language and you're trying to memorize or understand a story, summarizing it's going to help you better understand the content. It's also going to help you better understand the linguistics, the syntax and the pronunciation of it, because you have the ability to put it into your own words in that second language. We also have metacognitive strategies, and metacognitive strategies are strategies about thinking about thinking about language. And so one of the things that you can think about in this area is how to use strategies. And so you might be wondering as you're learning something, okay, which strategy would be best for me to use in order to memorize this? So again, you have a variety of strategies. Some people like to use mnemonics, or they like to use lists, or they like to use hand gestures in order to help them remember something. But thinking about which strategies to use is a metacognitive type of a strategy. An awareness of one's abilities is also a metacognitive strategy. An awareness that I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. I know what strategies I can use, and then I get to pick out which ones that they are. Another metacognitive strategy is self-monitoring, keeping an eye on what's going on with me. You've had similar experiences where you say something and then you hear it and you say, you know what, that's not what I intended to say. And so you're monitoring yourself, you're self-monitoring. Very good thing to do when you're trying to learn language. Obviously, you want to be monitoring other people as well so that you can try to sync up what you're saying with what is quote-unquote proper. Self-assessment, and this is also very good. Again, you're going back and you're reflecting on what's going on. You have all this stuff recorded in your head, and you can try to work at assessing that, how good it was, and what you can do to make it better. And last is self-management of learning. Creating independent learners, in my view, is one of the most important components of a good language learner. Someone who can take charge of their own language learning abilities. Well, in order to do that, you need to self-manage. You need to have that ability. That's a strategy you want to give your students so that they can take over in their own language learning. Anyway, these are some metacognitive strategies. Herrera and Murray also talk about some socioaffective strategies. Working with other people, cooperating with others. Definitely a good way to learn is to, this is what I say, steal from other people. They have information, they have ideas, and if you can understand, you can monitor what they're doing, you can steal those ideas from them. If I'm overseas, I often go over and talk to a native speaker and I ask them for information. So cooperating with others, collaborating with others. You're working on a joint project for some reason, and as you're doing this project, you begin to negotiate meaning with the people who are there, and they help you and you help them. As the scripture says, iron sharpens iron. It's a great way to help each other get better in language learning. So collaborative efforts are also very good. Positive reinforcement. When someone does something good, you reinforce that with them. You let them know they're doing a good job. You try to encourage those people. I am absolutely amazed at the number of people who fail simply because they get depressed. They get despondent because they think they're not doing well. So one of my jobs as a teacher is to encourage. If I see a little progress, I want to encourage them. I want to let them know they can do it. So that's going to be my job. Of course, the other aspect of this is to have students encourage other students so that people can move forward. I oftentimes try to, students have a bar. They think, oh, this is only as high as I can go. And I try to raise that bar, try to make it higher so that I can kind of force them to do better. And then they succeed and they're like, oh, this is great. I didn't realize that I could do this. So people oftentimes have a lower lower level of success. Okay, now these strategies are not in the typical work that was done by O'Malley and Chamot and Robbins, but Herrera and Murray add these in. I think these are great strategies that you should use with your bilingual students and they should be able to do this. And the first one here is code switching. When students are talking, sometimes they switch back and forth between languages, one because it's probably easier, or one be able to explain an idea more quickly. But it's definitely an advantage in language learning and can be a strategy to help students make that transition between first and second language. Another definite possibility is translation. And actually, this is an older style of language learning that people used for just reading and writing. But this can be used also in second language learning, even in the oral aspects, or obviously in what we're looking at, the cognitive academic language learning. So translation is definitely a way to copy from one side to the other to help learn language. And lastly, you're using the L1 in order to learn the L2. Again, this is a great way to learn language because you're stealing from your background knowledge in the L1 to help learn things in the L2. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it's a definite plus. As I mentioned earlier, when I was studying Japanese, this was a lot harder to do because a lot of the words didn't have any Latinates or any cognates that I could use to help me learn the language. So it was a little harder to do in that language, but still a definitely good strategy, and I'm glad Herrera and Murray brought it out here. Okay, let's take a look at the actual CALLA method. CALLA, again, is the Cognitive Academic Language Learning Method. Definitely is a good thing. I like this much better than any of the other sheltered instruction or content-based instruction methods that are out there. Actually, of all of them, this is the one that I appreciate more than any of the others. So it was developed primarily through Chamot and O'Malley in the 1990s. They designed this for students to learning the essential academic content and academic language to become independent and self-regulated learners. And so these are big words here. First of all, they're designed for academic and content and language. It's also so that they can become independent, they can become self-regulated learners through an increasing command over the variety of strategies for language learning in school. And so a lot of good pluses here. Academic content, language content, two different focuses, right? Also, to become independent learners and to develop the use of strategies. This is a great design for language learning. It encompasses a lot of positive things that have come out of cognitive language research over the years. It also includes a focus on explicit strategies instruction, which I would definitely agree with. Oddly enough, there are a lot of there are a lot of teachers out there who espouse implicit language learning, but here they're talking about explicit strategies teaching. And I think that there are times where you need explicit language teaching as well as explicit strategies teaching. So both are going to be necessary. But here, O'Malley and Chamot, one of their focuses is on using strategies, teaching strategies, and getting students to understand what those strategies are. This is a little diagram, actually it's not a diagram, a little list that I have seen in several places, and we'll go take a look at this. But it talks about the two different roles, the roles of the teacher and the roles of the student. Now, this list right here for the teacher, this is actually the nuts and bolts of the CALLA method, the preparation, presentation, practice, self-evaluation, and expansion. And it's within those areas that the teacher has responsibility. We'll look at those in just a minute. But some of the workshops that are outside also show this side, where students have responsibility as well. And I like this very much. Language learning is not that the teacher just pours it on to the student, but that the student has responsibilities also. So what they're going to need to do, obviously, is going to have to be there. They're going to have to participate. They're going to have to try to apply and assess the strategies that they're using. How well are they being done? They're going to try to develop and establish their own independence so that they no longer need us as the teacher. And lastly, they're going to see if they can transfer some of these strategies to other areas of language learning. So it's very, very nice little thing here. Let me take a quick look over here and see if I can find it. Here we are. This is a method here. This was done for a presentation done in New York. It's an excellent little piece of work here by Chamot and Robbins. And this was done a while ago. But we'll take a look down here. Oh, real quick. You see there's a variety of things here that they're going to be talking about. They're going to be introducing what everything is and some of the reasons and how they got into this. But the thing that I wanted to show you was this particular graphic, which shows the teacher's responsibility here and then the student's responsibility. And every time I see this graphic, I really like that it's a collaborative effort between student and teacher. And so definitely a nice little graph. If you are interested, there are links to this down below, and I can certainly provide you with more information if you are interested. So let's take a look at some of the things that are going on in here. In the preparation phase, it's the job of the teacher to provide content and language objectives. It's also their responsibility to try to look for background information that they can link to. Again, this is this whole idea where I'm going to try to activate that background knowledge so that it's going to be easier for them to step into newer knowledge. Also, the teacher's responsibility to try to identify essential vocabulary. Not only high-frequency vocabulary, but also vocabulary they're going to need for whatever content is being taught. And then lastly, try to make sure that whatever you're going to be doing is going to be fun for your students. Keep it motivational. Okay, the next step is presentation, and when you're doing presentations, you try to make it multimodal. Try to use a variety of ways of language learning. Use all the senses if possible. Do listening and speaking and reading and writing and move around. Smell if you can. Touch things if you can. Multimodal is going to provide multiple opportunities for students to learn language according to the way they learn. So I also find it interesting that, we talk about students who are more oral-based or oral-based, students who are more visual-based, and I think to myself, what about all the people in places like China or Korea or Japan where writing takes so much more time to learn, and so they're obviously going to be much more visually based as opposed to auditory. And what do we do in situations like that where students don't learn as well? How do they succeed? Or are they forced to move into that area? I don't know. Anyway, that's a rabbit trail. Multimodal, make sure that you have explicit instructions as you go through. Don't just do implicit. Don't just give them opportunities for listening and reading, but give them opportunities and tell them specifically what those items are, linguistically and content-wise. If possible, when you're looking at strategies, you model them. Okay, let's just say you're going to do one strategy a week or two strategies a week. You model that strategy so that you can help them see how it's done. And if you're dealing with other areas as well, you need to, for example, writing a science paper or presenting a history paper, that you actually model how it's done so they can see what's done there. Provide opportunity for discussion so that they can ask questions, they can banter around ideas so that they can get a better picture of what's going on. Again, that's how some students learn, is through that process. Okay, next step would be practice, and your practice section of your method here should be hands-on if possible. Try to allow students to actively participate. Make sure that it's varied. Again, we're trying to connect these two here so that it's not only one method of doing things, one mode of doing things, but there are a variety of ways to do it. Make sure that the practice is actually something real and useful. I know that in some places, people are going to have to write a science paper. Well, make it a real science paper. Or they're going to have to actually do a presentation. Well, make it a presentation that they actually can use in real situations. Make sure that you're using strategies at this point so that you can help them learn language and they can see how it's used in real life. After you do the practice, you do some self-evaluation. Let them reflect on what it is that they've learned. Let them evaluate their own language learning. They can also evaluate your teaching so that they can help you become a better teacher. That's really not what they're supposed to be doing here, but just a little throw-in from the old Doc Tuzi. But they can evaluate their own language learning, what they did good, what they did well, what they did poorly, what needs to be changed in their own strategies. And lastly, they can write about their strategies use. What they did well with them and what they didn't. Lastly, we're going to look at expansion, how they can apply what they've learned, both the content and the language and strategies. How can they apply it to their lives or to other courses? Or how they can apply it to their first language. And so there are opportunities for them to take what they've learned and expand it out into other areas. Again, so it's more useful to them. I remember, just an aside again, I'm in a computer class, and my professor is talking about how to write a program. And the steps involved in writing a computer program. And of course, most of the students, they went out. They were not interested. But he went through this process whereby you brainstormed ideas, you began to organize things into some sort of a list, and then you took that organizational pattern and you tried to create an algorithm where all the steps that you would need to go through this, and then at some point you actually started writing the code. And after he got done explaining this little process, He went on to say, you can use this for anything in your life, whether you're creating a party or you're building a building, it's the same type of process. And I'm sitting there going, that's brilliant. That's a plan I can use anywhere. And that's the same type of idea that they're doing here in this expansion section, where you're taking an idea and then trying to expand it to be used in other places in life. Okay, the CALLA method, also, if you go out and you get one of their books, and you can see there's a place where you can go get their book over there at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. That's the title of one of their more recent books on the CALLA method. They break things down as well into math, science, and social studies. And they actually go into the requirements, the core requirements, and what things needed to be studied in mathematics in the high schools or in the elementary schools. And then they break things down saying, look, if this is what you need to teach, here are the specialized vocabulary and whatnot that need to be done. So it's an excellent way that they've broken this down. Now for mathematics, and this is true of all of them, like any other field of study, is dependent on language and understanding and development. Now, in my opinion, the language side of mathematics is probably the easier of the content areas to do. It is rather limited, the type of vocabulary that is being used, and mathematics is language independent in its purest form. Explaining mathematics, of course, isn't, so it does require language when you're trying to do this. But just the concepts itself, like music, the concepts themselves do not require language, so it's going to be a little easier, I think, to try to pass these ideas around. But there is specialized language for math. There's specialized vocabulary, syntax, discourse items that you'll want to identify and teach as you go through. Reading problems in particular are some areas. Or just in class when you're talking about equals, what does this mean? What's 2 and 2? And, that whole thing. Those are things those are items that you can be teaching. There are also some sociolinguistic concepts and cultural background ideas that will need to be identified. The main point here is to identify the language and content objectives. Mathematics, again, it's going to be similar. There are going to be science problems specific to given areas, be it chemistry or biology. And again, Chamot has gone in and done some of the research. If you go look at the textbooks, and there are issues that are involved that are specific to certain areas that you as a teacher want to identify. Again, you're identifying content and you're identifying language. Well, in this case, you're going to have science-specific issues that you may need to be cognizant of. You're going to have also the issue of collecting and recording evidence, something that's not done in other classes. That's a whole procedure that's going on in science. You're going to have to try to explain your ideas, how to form explanations from evidence. Again, something that's done primarily in a science class. You're going to want to have to separate that out for your second language learners and let them know that's what's going on there. Connecting explanations to knowledge. Again, this is a writing intensive or presentation intensive types of ideas that need to be separated out for your second language learners when you're trying to teach this, so that you can give them the scaffolding that they need. Lastly, in science, you're sharing your findings, whether it's a presentation or whether it's a paper. Science courses are going to require that. In areas like social studies, you're going to have similar types of things, whether it's history or geography, politics, or even economics. All of these areas are going to have specialized vocabulary and specialized ways of saying and writing things that need to be identified when you're identifying the content and the language objectives, so that these students can understand those academic language, academic vocabulary, and syntax and speaking patterns, so that they'll be able to succeed when they get into these classes. Some content instruction elements that I just wanted to re-emphasize as we go through here. When you're using the CALLA method, actually when you're teaching any type of content, you're identifying both the content and the language objectives. So normally when you see a scope and sequence and you've got, your items and then the order in which they're going to be described here in your scope and sequence, normally it's just language that you're looking at. Well, in this case, you're looking at language, all the aspects of language, and you're doing content. You're going to look at both. You're going to have specialized reading types of things that you're going to include in here as well, whether it's a literature type thing, a short story or a play or a poem, or something that's more abstract and less personal, like something that's scientific or medical. Specialized writing, same type of thing. Depending on the field that you're in, you're going to have something that's specialized. Specialized types of presentations, specialized types of tasks that need to be managed in a given area. So when you're using the CALLA method, you're really breaking all these areas down, looking at, okay, what's going to be required for these second language learners that they may not have come across, or specialized vocabulary or speaking ideas that you need to break down. And that's the CALLA method, the cognitive academic language learning approach. In my view, it's probably one of the best content-based instruction approaches that are out there. I so appreciate the way that Chamot had gone out and broken down all of the research in finding out what it is that the schools actually require, what the core is for those given areas, so that you as a second language learner can then appropriate that as you begin to build activities using the CALLA method. And I would recommend that you, if you have opportunity, that you go take a look at one of these CALLA models or these workshops here in particular, so that you can get a better understanding of what this is and how you can then try to appropriate this type of idea into your classes. That's all I have for now, and I want to thank you for stopping by. I do hope to see you again. If you do have any questions, you can shoot me a message down below or shoot me an email. I do thank you for coming and hope to see you again. Bye-bye now.